So, we all know that at the end of Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth get married, and Elizabeth gets to go become the mistress of his grand estate at Pemberley. But exactly what does that mean? What is Elizabeth's actual life going to be like once she moves into Pemberley and is a married woman? Well, in today's video, that's exactly where we're going to be going into. We're going to be breaking down what her everyday life would be like as a married woman in the upper class of England in the early 1800s. So if you want to learn more about that, then definitely stay tuned for today's video. My name is Ellie Dashwood, and this is my channel where we talk about history and literature. If you like either of those things, please subscribe. So today we're going to really be breaking down hour by hour a typical day in Elizabeth's life. Now, I feel like to get a typical day of what a life would be like for a mistress of a grand estate in the early 1800s, we need to fast forward a little bit to maybe 10 years into Elizabeth and Darcy's marriage. They have at least 2 children. The girl is going to be 9 years old and the boy is going to be about 7 years old. You guys help me name the girl. I put it out to you on Instagram a few days ago of whether you think Darcy and Elizabeth would name their daughter Anne after his mother, Mr. Darcy's mother, or Jane after Elizabeth's sister, and you guys definitely overwhelmingly voted for Anne. So we're going with Anne Darcy being the 9-year-old daughter. She has a governess, and her younger brother, Fitzwilliam, yes, I just named him after his dad. Anyway, Fitzwilliam's about 7 years old, and he's currently also under the same care of the governess. Also, just because you guys are going to be wondering what's happening to Georgiana in this hypothetical, she's married and living in London. I feel like I'm literally writing a Pride and Prejudice sequel in this film, but it is required for the whole concept to work. And now that we've laid the framework for this concept, let's dive into it with Elizabeth waking up at Pemberley. It's a beautiful summer morning when Elizabeth's lady maid comes in to wake her up. 7 a.m. she brings her a pitcher of warm water to wash in. She draws the curtains. She wakes Elizabeth up and then she leaves. The lady's maid is going to go and wait while her mistress washes, and she's going to go eat breakfast with the other upper servants like the housekeeper. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is going to stretch in her bed and be like, oh, I must wake up. Then she gets up and she washes herself with the warm water, and when she's ready to finally get dressed for the day, she rings for her lady's maid who comes up and helps her get dressed. So let's say all of that takes about an hour, and it's now 8 a.m. Elizabeth is dressed and ready for the day. What is one of the first things she does? Well, she is a mother in this reality, remember, and she's gonna go see her children. Her children would be up in the schoolroom with their governess at this time having their lessons, and she's going to drop by and visit them for possibly about 10 minutes. Once there, she reads a chapter of the Bible with them. Maybe she hears Anna recite some of the French her French master has recently taught her. Meanwhile, Fitzwilliam is studying alongside his sister because he is not old enough to have his own tutor yet. Meanwhile, Elizabeth bids her children goodbye for the morning and heads down at 8:15 to consult with her housekeeper, Mrs. Reynolds. Of course, they have kept the same housekeeper all these years because they're wonderful employers. Some families did keep housekeepers pretty much until they could no longer work because of old age, while other families went through housekeepers almost once a year. The fact that the Darcys have kept Mrs. Reynolds on as a servant for that long does show what sort of devotion they inspire in their servants. Then her and Mrs. Reynolds go over the menus again for this weekend, Elizabeth making sure that all of the courses will be prepared because they have guests arriving later today. And Elizabeth wants to make sure that all of the meals for the weekend are 100% as she requested, and the cook and the housekeeper were able to get all of the supplies they needed, and Mrs. Reynolds assures her that they have. And also because Elizabeth takes very seriously her position as the lady of the manor, she lets Mrs. Reynolds know that a family in the parish is suffering from consumption and that she would like all the leftovers from dinner last night and any from breakfast this morning put into a basket for her to take with her when she goes on to call on the sick and poor of the neighborhood later in the day. Meanwhile, Mrs. Reynolds also has to let her know what's going on with the servants. So, for example, one of the footmen has come down with a terrible headache and is in his bedroom. After all of these serious discussions with the housekeeper, Elizabeth needs to go and actually make sure that her house is prepared to receive the guests that are coming later today. So at 8:45 a.m., Elizabeth would be going through the guest rooms, making sure that the maids did their job properly, dusting, sweeping, airing out the rooms, and changing the bed linen so that everything is super fresh and beautiful for her guests. Now, this does take us to an important aspect of guest rooms in the 1800s, which is what type of linen they used. So when you think of bed linen, such as sheets and pillowcases, or table linen, like napkins and tablecloths, a lot of those today are made out of cotton, which of course comes from the cotton plant. Meanwhile, in the early 1800s, bed linen and table linen were still made out of linen. Right, I know. That's where they get their name. Totally unforeseen. And linen actually comes from a plant called flax. Anyway, in the early 1800s, a family's linen collection was similar to their fine china collection. It had a whole room dedicated to it, and in a house the scale of Pemberley, it's something that would have been handed down from one mistress to another. It was like the family linen. One thing that makes this possible is the fact that linen is a more durable material that can last for decades if properly cared for. So it was something that could be passed down through generations, and of course each Mistress of Pemberley would be building on the linen collection, repairing it, and replacing items throughout the years. Now, going back to Elizabeth checking the guest rooms, she would want to make sure that the sheets they are using are in fact the family's best linen, because a gentleman's family would carry at least 3 different grades of bedding materials. The highest grade would be the best linen used in guest rooms, and it was about 60% more cost-wise than the good linen used in the family set. So the family set would be what Darcy and Elizabeth sleep in every night. It would be still a good quality linen, but it wouldn't be the most super expensivest linen that's going into the guest room sheets. There would be the 3rd level, or the servant linen, which is one of the low quality linens available. So how you could tell these sheets apart in a family's massive linen collection is that they were all hand embroidered with, first of all, the initials of the couple. So for example, for Elizabeth and Darcy, it would be F-E-D, or Fed, because Fitzwilliam and Elizabeth Darcy. I just think that's funny that their initials are Fed, but we're going with it here. And then, of course, the year that this piece of linen was added to the collection. And then also it would have a letter such as B for best linen, F for family linen, or S for servant linen. And that would be the key that if you couldn't tell just by looking at it, you could tell by reading the embroidery of what level of linen this sheet actually was. But Elizabeth makes sure to look and see that yes, the sheets are in fact embroidered with the B for best linen. Her guests deserve the best. And so do you. Yes, this is a transition for me talking about this video's sponsor, Brooklinen. So Brooklinen was founded on the idea that people deserve beautiful home essentials like bed linen without the luxury markup, but still have amazing quality. And I have to say that I am thoroughly impressed with my linen sheets. And so I got their linen hardcore sheet bundle. The first night I laid in my bed, I was like, this feels ridiculously high quality. And it is ridiculously high quality. It's 100% French and Belgian flax that was handmade into these sheets in Portugal. And they also stone wash their linen sheets, which makes them feel softer and more luxurious. They do really make me feel like Elizabeth Bennet sleeping at Pemberley. I'm like, I have fancy linen sheets just like Elizabeth had. Exciting moments. Also, their online shopping experience is so easy. My favorite part of putting together the linen bundle on their website was the fact that you can mix and match colors, and you can even mix and match sizes. I got their new and upcoming petal color, which is pink, because you know I love my bedding to be pink. Also, I just have to say their packaging is so cute. Look at this. It's so cute. So if you're interested in cute packaging and high quality linen sheets and waking up feeling like you are the Mistress of Pemberley, then definitely check out Brooklinen. And good news, Brooklinen is actually offering my viewers a special discount of $20 off of any order over 100, and you can click the link in the description below and use my code Ellie in all caps at checkout. Now, while Elizabeth would have loved some Brooklinen linen in her guest rooms, she did have, of course, the highest quality linen they could get, and satisfied that the guest rooms were all prepared, she moves on with her day. Where does she go next? Well, to visit that sick footman and see how his headache is doing. He tells her that his headache is greatly improved and he thinks he can be back to work in no time, but she looks at him and she says, "You don't look improved, I'm sending for the doctor." So she finds the other footman and is like, "Go get the doctor." And this is how you take care of your servants at Pemberley. Up next at 9:15, Elizabeth goes in to her writing desk to start letter writing. Because, like I talk about in my video recently on Jane Austen's love life, letter writing was such a major aspect of women's lives during the time. She already has 2 letters started, one to Jane and one to Georgiana, and she adds on new updates that she also wants to include. Meanwhile, in her letter to Georgiana, she decides to say, "Hey, do you know any footmen looking for a position? Because I feel like our footmen are overworked and we need to add another one, and this is the real cause of the footman's headache." Why? Because the upper classes really did use their networks of social connections to fill places for servants. And with Georgiana living in London, she is in a perfect place to hear a footman looking for a promotion. Georgiana has all the connections. With her hand thoroughly tired from letter writing at 10 a.m., it is finally time for breakfast. It feels like Elizabeth has done so much and it's just barely breakfast time. But she does go into breakfast with Mr. Darcy. And this gives Elizabeth the perfect opportunity over the pots of jelly to tell Darcy all about Jane's latest letter, and she tells him all about the footman and his headache. Mr. Darcy tells her that his land steward is letting him know about some problem tenants, and he's going to be gone pretty much all day till probably 4 o'clock, writing out the land steward, trying to fix all of that. And Elizabeth's like, "That is great. I don't need you anyway. I have to go call on the poor family with consumption later. And I also need to go call on that family that just moved into one of the cottages. I think the mother's a widow of a clergyman, and we're gonna have to invite them to dinner maybe next Wednesday." Breakfast conversation just has so much going down at Pemberley. Elizabeth would also tell him that it was absolutely required on her day schedule to like this video. That's right. I'm sure Elizabeth would like this video. And if you guys want to be like the Mistress of Pemberley, you can too. Thank you so much. So after breakfast, Elizabeth and Darcy go their separate ways, and Elizabeth sits down to deal with the expense records. There's so much math involved in being the Lady of Pemberley, but of course she tries to keep it to a minimum and has the housekeeper do most of it. Thankfully, the housekeeper is very good at keeping accurate records, and Elizabeth just has to go over and double check them, that all of the money going out of the household makes sense, and that there's no one category where expenses are ballooning out of control that she needs to cut down on. It takes her an hour to even look over this though. But once she's done, it's about 12 o'clock and she is ready for a break. She heads out to walk among the beautiful grounds at Pemberley. But her walk also has a purpose. Elizabeth and Darcy decided to build a greenhouse on the property, and she wants to go and overlook the work and see its progress, which she does, but of course she also winds along the beautiful paths for a while. And after doing that, she's rather hungry. She comes back home about 1 o'clock to eat a form of lunch. Now, whether she would have even called it lunch is questionable. Lunch was a word, luncheon was a word. However, not everybody decided to name their midday 12 to 1 o'clock snack lunch. It was just a weird nameless snack that they needed. Anyway, she goes and she has that though, and after that she goes back up to her bedroom to be changed into appropriate clothes to go out among society. and she rings up for her lady's maid to help her do that. Her first order of business with going out is to go and visit some of the poor and the sick in the area, which was part of her responsibility as being mistress of such a grand estate that has so many tenants attached to it. And because being Lady Bountiful, as it was called, or a distributor of gifts and help among the poor, was such a major role of the social class, it's something that she would be training Anne up to as well, even at 9 years old. And so what Elizabeth's going to do today is go up to the schoolroom and get Anne to be able to accompany her on these visits. This is something they do about 3 times a week together. Anyway, so Elizabeth gets Anne and they go out together in a carriage. Elizabeth would have liked to walk, but she's already kind of tired and it's far and Anne's little, so they take a carriage to go call upon the poor. First, they call on that family that has consumption. They give them the basket of food that Mrs. Reynolds put together for the trip. And honestly, all of the Pemberley leftovers are better than anything they can hope for in normal life, so it's actually an upgrade. Next up, Elizabeth visits a school she started that helps poor farm laborers' daughters become maids. They are all hard at work on embroidering sheets. They're learning how to embroider the linen sheets. Yes, this video is all about the linen today. So it's getting close to 3:30, which is the time Elizabeth wants to call on that new family she told Mr. Darcy about with the widow of the clergyman. And so she takes Anne back home, turns her back over into the care of the governess, and takes the carriage to call on this cottage. She finds them very genteel. The mother is from a upper class background, and the mother has 2 daughters of a marriageable age. Elizabeth is already planning the balls she's going to invite them to, and some young gentlemen that will also be invited. Elizabeth's just turning into a matchmaker in her old age. She, of course, invites them to dinner next Wednesday, which they readily accept. So after welcoming them to the neighborhood, Elizabeth heads back home and is there just in time for Children's Hour at 4 p.m. Children's Hour in the 1800s was a time when the governess would bring the children of the household down to the drawing room and the mother and father would interact with them, tell them stories, read them stories, sing along with them at the piano, and basically have quality family time. And thankfully Darcy is back from riding about with his land agent, and so the whole family assembles and enjoys an hour. Well, almost, because it gets cut short by the guests arriving. Yes, the guests that are going to be staying in those guest rooms that Elizabeth looked over and made sure they had the best linen. Those guests are here. The governess takes Anne and Fitzwilliam back up to the schoolroom while Elizabeth greets the guests and has them shown to their bedrooms. It's conveniently almost 5 o'clock, which is time to dress for dinner anyway, so they can rest and get dressed. This video just keeps having so many of these rhymey moments. Meanwhile, Elizabeth goes back upstairs to her room and her lady's maid comes and helps her put on evening things. Of course, as the mistress and hostess of the house, Elizabeth would not want to take the full hour allotted for dressing. She would want to dress as quickly as possible and get back down to the drawing room so that when her guests start to trickle back down, she will be there to greet them and make small talk with them while they wait for dinner. And finally, it is 6 p.m. and dinner is being announced. Everybody goes into the dining room and enjoys so many courses of food. After the meal is over, it's Elizabeth's job to lead the ladies out of the dining room, leaving the gentlemen to stay in the dining room for a little while and drink port or alcohol, and meanwhile the ladies will go into the drawing room and enjoy some coffee. This split of genders after dinner for a little while lasts for however long the gentlemen decide to stay over their port in the dining room. And meanwhile, there's been many a young lady sitting in the drawing room being like, when are they gonna come in? It's so boring hanging out with all these girls. I can't flirt with the guy I came here to see. So much drama happens here. Finally, all of the gentlemen, led by Mr. Darcy, come in to the drawing room to hang out with the ladies for the rest of the evening. By this point, it's probably 7:45, and Elizabeth is going to take this as an opportunity to leave her guests in the care of Mr. Darcy for a minute and go up and kiss her children goodnight. She's going to hear them say their prayers, kiss them goodnight, and then head back down to her guests. Meanwhile, her guests in the drawing room are going to do all of those drawing room occupations we see constantly in Austen's works, such as playing, singing, playing cards, maybe there's enough couples getting up some dancing. Yeah, that's what they're gonna do for hours and hours. So many hours that you get hungry multiple times. In fact, about 8:30, it's time for tea. The tea things are going to be shown in, and Elizabeth is going to preside over the tea of the evening. Meanwhile, after some more conversation and piano and card games, it is time for supper. It is supper time about 10 p.m. Now, supper is not a big formal meal. It's more like a buffet that they put food on a buffet at the side of the room, and for the next hour and a half or 2 hours, till maybe 11:30 or midnight, people can go and they can get whatever they want off of the buffet of food. Since the guest had a long, arduous day of traveling, though, it's going to be cut short at about 11:30, so everyone can go to bed and enjoy some rest. And finally, Elizabeth says goodnight to her guests and goes up to her bedroom where her lady's maid will help her get out of her evening outfit and into her nightgown. She is exhausted because she did so much stuff. And really, this is just the start of a weekend of entertaining for her. And this that I've just outlined would be a pretty typical day of a woman of the upper class being the mistress of a grand country estate. There were so many roles for her to fill, whether it was wife or mother, or mistress of the household, lady bountiful on the estate, an overseer of works being done by laborers, a correspondent of so many different people, helping to keep up the social position of the family. So much work. And it really could be an exhausting life. But it is a good thing that Elizabeth has some great linen sheets to snuggle into. And if you would like to feel like the Mistress of Pemberley in your own luxury linen sheeting, then definitely check out Brook Linen, again, this video's sponsor, and that is offering you guys $20 off any order of 100 with my code Ellie. Just click the link in the description below and use Ellie in all caps. Anyway, my name is Ellie Dashwood, and this is my channel where we talk about history and literature. If you like either of those things, then please subscribe and keep having an awesome day, because you're awesome. Bye! Baby, what are you doing here, Fluff? This is the baby. I'm kind of scared because sometimes she attacks me on my bed because she thinks it's her bed, and why am I on here?